I was born in Vernon, Texas on August the 27th, 1918. And my mother and father were S.A.L. Morgan, who was born and raised in the hill country right outside of Austin. And my mother was Mary Verna Johnson, who was raised in an East Texas town named Atlanta. I was named for my mother, the Mary, and one of her favorite brothers who was named Tom. So my name was Mary Tom Morgan. They were living, I was the third child of S.A.L. Morgan and Verna, and I had an older brother, John Carey, and a sister who was 22 months older than I. And when I was a month old, we moved to Wichita Falls. Well, it's hard to tell by looking at me now, but I was a very, very weak infant. And they couldn't find anything, any milk. They didn't give babies anything to drink, to eat back in those days. And I was allergic to milk. And they tried every kind of milk that they could think of and managed to keep me alive, but I was allergic to all kinds of milk. And so they would rub that old awful thick cod liver oil on me and put me out in the sun and let it soak in, and that's the only thing that kept me from having rickets. But when I was a year old, I weighed 9 pounds, which I just hadn't thrived at all. Well, by this time, when I was a month old, my family moved to Wichita Falls, where my father went into a law firm down there, and the doctors told my mother that I would never live through the heat of Wichita Falls, that they had to get me out of there. So the whole family packed up in an old open touring car, except for one of my father's sisters, who's named Margaret. And Margaret took me and carried me on a pillow all the way from Wichita Falls to Manitou Springs in Colorado. And the rest of the family, including my grandfather and one of my other aunts, took an old open touring car to Manitou Springs with my father driving. My whole family went up there, and then my mother was left up there with the 3 children. And of course, it never failed. When we were on a trip or when we went anyplace, Daddy always got a wire that he had to go back to take care of business. So our mother was out in Manitou Springs on the edge of Colorado Springs, and he said, I've got to go home and you've got to take me and put me on the Fort Worth and Denver in the middle of the night. And she said, but I don't know how to drive. And he said, well, I'll teach you how. So she put the 3 children in the car, and he taught her how to drive between Manitou Springs and Colorado Springs. And he came back to Wichita Falls. Well, my mother was a great thrower-awayer. She threw away everything because they moved so many times, but for some reason she kept the telegrams that she sent to my father in August saying, baby critically ill and putting her in the hospital. And send money. How about that? Send money. Well, the next one was that she was unable to get me in the hospital, and the third telegram was that I was some better. Well, what had happened, she had hired a practical nurse to help take care of these little bitty kids up there, and Nestle's came on the market that summer with its first formula. And the formula agreed with me, and that's what kept me alive, and I began to thrive from that day on.